Because Superman and characters like that, they suddenly opened up this kind of wonderful dimension of the imagination that I previously hadn't had access to, because these ideas were brilliantly stupid.
Superman is a direct translation of Übermensch. In German, the Übermensch, they also use sometimes the word overman. But it goes way, way, way back into antiquity. There's a hyperanthropos in Greek. So that's an old thing. But the Superman is a direct translation of Übermensch.
I know that because of Nietzsche, the Superman myth does lend itself very well to fascism.
Superman itself is the symbol of force, power, and violence. That is what he represents. And that has had an enormous influence, which one cannot possibly exaggerate, on the use not only of this country, but of the use of many other countries, you see, especially in Germany. It is utterly impossible to understand what happened in Germany, all the different massacres and so on, unless you realize that they were imbued with this Superman spirit.
There were about 3 or 4 halfway decent comic books, and the rest of it was still the same juvenile rubbish that had been produced for the last 40 or 50 years.
So what you teach the young person, and incidentally the older person too, is that you have no responsibility. You have to appeal to one individual who will take care of everything.
What I think happened was that a lot of people who were just interested in the adventures of Green Lantern, even though they were 35 or 40, having Watchmen gave them a way of saying, oh look, I'm not emotionally retarded.
What? What the?
Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spin Rack. We also have
Alvin Ellis, ready to rock.
Let's listen to Alan, right? We got Alan here.
There were tons and tons of headlines just saying, Bamsock Pow comics have grown up. And like they hadn't. There were about 3 or 4 halfway decent comic books, and the rest of it was still the same juvenile rubbish that had been produced for the last 40 or 50 years. What the comic boom of the 80s did was grant a license to a lot of people not to have to actually grow up, by calling them graphic novels, which was a term that I hated because they're not particularly graphic and they're certainly not novels. Usually they're 12 issues of She-Hulk stapled together. That is not a novel. What I think happened was that a lot of people who were just interested in the adventures of Green Lantern, even though they were 35 or 40, having Watchmen gave them a way of saying, oh look, I'm not emotionally retarded. I am reading, this is a graphic novel that are for adults. No, it's not. It's the same comics that you've been reading for ages. I would feel happier about it if graphic novel actually meant something more than it does at the moment, which is big, expensive comic. And that's pretty much all it means.
I will say that last part, I could get with that part, the big, the term meanings, and that's why we brought up the first part. And Marvel had it, Steranko had a term for it, for just something different than what the comic book was. And, it can be that, but all the other stuff of shitting on us, I can't say it another way, shitting on the audience, as he did after Watchmen. He had, basically not said this harshly, but he was kind of saying, I'm moving away from comic books and then I'm doing some self-publishing of some things. But the superhero stuff, I'm not doing that until, money got tight and his friends from the from Swamp Thing, they were saying, hey, we got this Image thing. You want to join us? And he had a lot of stuff going, but he did it. He made a lot of money at Image doing the same sort of comic books, but with his flair. I will give him, he did do it with his flair, not just Supreme, but a bunch of other things. But what do you feel on his statements? I won't color him saying he trashed it. What do you feel about his statements?
I agree 100%.
With what?
Everything he said.
You agree with everything he said, that people aren't growing up? That's all that stuff?
Yeah, I would say the comic books are for the young and the young at heart. These are these are fantasy characters. These are characters that you would find in like a mythological or a fantasy, a fable, like King Arthur type place where you got dragons and stuff. Those type of characters where the bowman can hit any target, and this guy's able to do stuff because he has magic powers, but nobody cares because it's in that fantasy setting. But then you move all of these guys into contemporary real world, and then there's a problem because now it becomes, well, how do we explain? We got to explain what these guys are doing because magic is not the primary thing, it's science. So we got to explain what these guys are doing. So we get aliens, we get people who were created through magic. We get super science, that type of stuff, utility belts that have all of these particular compartments. So we get all of that type of stuff going in there. And the problem is that was great for the kids. But as everybody got older, it became more and more, how is this happening? More justification. Even Grant Morrison went so far as to say, look, the kids understand it's not real. It's the adults who need constant, reassurance that what they're reading actually makes sense. And none of it's real. So it's still a very juvenile, yes, you can have something, but it's usually not the superhero stuff. But you can have something that, look, it's a really good story, but at the same breath, this is still a medium for kids. You have grown people running around in costumes. There's no reason for it. So, the fact that you still enjoy it, that you're in touch with, your inner child, that's not a big deal. Doesn't mean you have arrested development.
That's what he's saying, though.
No. I don't believe that. But he said the thing that he said was that you don't have to grow up. That's the part that I'm going on. You don't have to grow up and say, no, this is kid stuff. I don't have to read it. This is not the same as reading Goodnight Moon and calling it high-level literature. Okay? I enjoy reading comic books. I enjoy these particular adventures. I enjoy sequential art. There's no big deal with that. But a lot of the people who read it still feel embarrassed that they're reading this stuff, and so they want this to be they want it to be justified. That's why we got darker stories. Okay, that's why we got you have one story that's trying to explain how Batman is able to come up with these particular polymers and so on and so forth, so he can survive whatever he did. And the next story he's riding on a dinosaur. Come on, it's silly when you think about it, but it's still great entertainment. And every once in a while we get a nice, good, hard-hitting story where somebody makes the most of the medium. But at the end of the day, anybody who tells me it's not, like, look, these are grown adults running around in outfits.
You're talking about like cosplayers. I'm going to say this, right? If you factor that in, the father of that material is Alan Moore. Watchmen would be rubbish. The Dark Knight is rubbish. And I'm saying, taking the things for what they're worth as far as what they did, I'm saying it did both of those. I would put Dark Knight more because it has a little more. It's what Frank Miller did when he was doing Daredevil, pushing the envelope. Like, Watchmen is taking this and saying, hey, this is your kid stuff, and I'm putting them in the realistic setting, and they don't work in this realistic setting. And that's been his style, and you can even see it in his Supreme. It goes that route. So it's like, you can't do that material and saying, only thing he pulled back on is the Killing Joke, saying that didn't work out because basically he was trying to say that the Killing Joke was, Batman and Joker are timeless characters. They're stuck in a comic book. So they're gonna, they're stuck in this rat race. That's why Batman's come and say, one of us is gonna kill each other. It's like, oh yeah, that's what Joker's been trying to do this entire time. Batman isn't trying to kill him, but he will if he, under a different writer, he will if push comes to shove, he kills the Robin or Batgirl. If it comes to that, you might put him under the ground, So that's the thing. I think the hard part is that they're adult people that take this thing seriously, but at the same time, and there are a lot of straights that bought into those words.
What do you mean when you say take it seriously? What do you mean?
Like, argue about different things, hash things out, that sort of thing. Not take it seriously like they're real and that they're
like an argument like you and I have, or an argument about who's going to be who in a fight.
Um, either okay, that's a hard thing to say. I'm saying the stuff we have. If you go into the the youth, you're saying I just want to be clear. You're saying when you have the people who are talking about Spider-Man being able, he showed he's able to beat up this character. This is his power level, and he should be able. Are you talking about that sort of thing, and who can beat who? When you mentioned
Yeah,
that stuff, oh god, why you have to, this? Look, I'm just.
because that is part of the discussion, whether we want to acknowledge it or not.
Oh
And
my
when people think about a discussion about comic books, that's what they think it is. They don't think two people are talking about, no, look, right here, 1986. This is the dividing line for DC Universe, post-crisis. What was this? What was going on behind the scenes? Or if I'm saying, hey, Spider-Man is an actual archetype. He's the everyman archetype, and I'm just show it through stories, this type of stuff. You can actually write something about it or do research on the character to say, hey, this is how he connects to other characters that have this Spider-Man connection, like say like in Anansi the Spider-Man, a Kwaku Anansi, that type of stuff. Those are great discussions to have for these characters, but people aren't thinking that we're having those type of discussions. We're having the who can beat who in a fight discussion. Okay, that's the type of stuff. And then of course the other one they think is that unless this character looks and acts exactly the way that we think they should, okay, then it sucks. That's the other discussion they have, but not a discussion about
Okay,
the actual literature.
but this is the thing. You're bringing up some of the 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 problems when we have these. The hard part is you can be this. You can be. I don't think even the person that's doing those sort of art, the comic book guy, the quintessential comic book guy, who this day can have those discussions, say, Superman hasn't done XYZ in umpteen years. It's been terrible for whatever it was. So you can have there's so many things that you can do, but I think the hard part is I don't want to bring up this person because I don't know that the person watches the show, but I still feel you can be kind of socially backwards and be an adult and kind of look at the comic book art as a big thing. Like, I'm sorry to say, like, I don't mean any disrespect. Arlen Schumer. Have you seen Arlen Schumer and his books that he's
Yeah,
done?
I have an
Publications.
order. I have an autographed copy of the Silver Age by him,
So,
by Arlen Schumer.
so he also is in costume from time to time. He's very emotional about this, and he's even emotional about an artist's decline. Now, do you feel like I think you can have your way? Do you think that is a portion? Because I want to just stick to the portion with Alan Moore saying that this thing is because he leaves himself out of it, saying four good things. That means a Dark Knight, Watchmen, um, V for Vendetta, and I'm not sure what else he would put in that thing. He would put those things. Maybe put Electro Assassin in there, or something like that. I don't know, but like saying those are good comic books, and then the rest were rubbish. And I'm saying the monthly grind, yes, you're gonna have some things. 80s, yes, not everyone had to go take the longbow hunters. You didn't need to do that, right? Type of stuff at the
You
time.
did, you didn't need to do. You did not need to do Longbow Hunters. Did you do it? Yes. Was it successful?
Well,
Sure. Did
but
you
that's
need to
the
do it? No, you didn't
that,
need to do it.
the thing is the hard part with DC, and that's what the charge that Alan Moore led is taking, like, even though that's the thing, there was buzz around not necessarily Captain Atom but Blue Beetle, which DC ultimately did a series with, right? But at the same time, DC regretfully needed something to kind of say, we're here, and they've been trying to say we're here for a long time, and the only time people in the 80s noticed was the Legion, Titans, and for a little while the Omega Men. Right? Those are the books that were kind of, Ronin had a brief moment because it was collectibles, Frank Miller, and then as it went along, people kind of lost interest and it lost its collectability. So DC was like, these next things we got planned, they're probably not going to work. Shadow's not going to work. Dark Knight's not going to work. We don't know what's going on, and they were at odds. Even the idea of rebooting their universe, they kind of chickened out on it. They're like, we're not restarting everything. We're not, like, Marvel was kind of pushing for the original idea. But I think this darkness stuff comes from him, and then he still did it. That's still his style. He still would kind of go dark, which he was doing. I mean, he'd done it to death. He did the kind
Alan Moore?
Yeah, Alan Moore. And even the closest thing to him building bridges would be what's that thing? Tom Strong. But even that he still keeps his cynical, because he, at the heart of what he was doing was Super Duper Man versus Captain Marbles, but doing it seriously, like, or the
Alan Moore.
What's the name? What's that thing? The Super Folks, like that. So that's his. He never lost that portion of his style.
Well, see, that's another show we've never done. We need to do Alan Moore and Super Folks, but we'll get to that one eventually, God willing. But that's Alan Moore's style. Alan Moore, wants to write these things in a more cynical manner, in a more I won't call it adult. I'll just leave it as cynical, okay? And the logical progression of a cynical character who is supposed, and these are supposed to be heroic characters at the end of the day. So that's where he's at. I think it's hypocritical of Alan Moore to be critical of anybody else. Well, pretty much Alan Moore's like, when I do it, it's good. When everybody else does it, no, it's terrible. And they're trying to, spin some sort of narrative that these are adult and this is a graphic novel and this is high level literature. No, it's not. This is the same juvenile stuff that was always done. Okay. And Alan Moore's stuff is just, it's not necessarily the same juvenile stuff, but it's cynical beyond belief if you look at his body of work, especially at his body of work when it comes to superheroes. So I don't have any issue, I don't have any issue on that. But, even a broken clock can be right a day. You pretty much got it right when it comes to the reading body on comics. These were a lot of guys who, one of the reasons why the Marvel was outpacing DC, well, not one, but one, DC for the longest period of time decided they were just going to be happy being number two, which we've discussed before. But the other thing was that, the Marvel comics these were the books that were supposed to be for the adults, if you will. Mind you, these were still kids reading them. They were just teenagers. Okay, but the DC comic, those were for kids, and it was silly, and it was stupid, all of that type of stuff that they would go. But the Marvel comics, no, these were the adult stories. Okay, this was the high level literature. This was the high level literature, that you could go in and you didn't have to be embarrassed or ashamed about reading a comic book, because if you were reading Marvel, you were okay. That's what it was that DC was that they were trying to tag to. And Stan knew exactly what he was doing. Julie Schwartz was like, I'm perfectly fine selling to the 8 to 12-year-old. And Sam was there, he was there smirking away that this guy was over there. You remember the interview. The guy was like, I wouldn't recommend these comics for anybody over the age of 12. And Julie Schwartz was like, they're for people the age of 12. They're not supposed to be for people over that particular age. And Stan is smirking because he's like, yeah. He's like, I got you guys reading this stuff thinking it's high-level literature. This is the same stuff DC is doing. What is it? My characters just moan a lot more. That's all it is. So Stan was like having a good time just watching the whole thing going on. But that's where the whole thing was. Okay, these guys were like, we want to read this stuff, but we don't want to be seen as juvenile. We don't want to be seen as like, this is kid stuff. We want this stuff to be taken seriously. And how do we get it to be taken seriously? We're going to throw in some murder. We're going to throw in a whole bunch of death. We're going to throw in some rape. Okay, we're going to make everything dark. Okay, Green Arrow, who was this guy who had trick arrows. No, he just kills people now. And this is how these things are going to be. This is how we're going to get. This medium is now going to be taken, seriously, and it's going to be respectful. Oh, forgot, these are grown people running around in Halloween costumes. Like, yeah, okay, good luck with that, buddy.
All right, look, I had to go. Like, what Marvel did was no different. Like, they were also following Julie Schwartz. Only thing that was different that Stan did was Stan had his voice in there, and at the same time he also had bickering, right? That's like the personalities, which the comic characters were just people of action. But at the same time, when he was going to these things, and they weren't looking at the fact that DC, that Flash and Green Lantern were the ones that were leading this, because Julie Schwartz was even though, like, amateur sci-fi or sci-fi pulp guy type of deal, in the clubs and that sort of thing. So Adam Strange, all that stuff, was pushed towards what they were doing. EC Comics, which was, like the books that were doing well up until of course the trials. Those were the books that were doing well in the 50s, excluding obviously Superman and Batman. That was doing well up until when Batman started to dip. The thing that Marvel people said, and this is what they knew at Marvel, not Stan, because Stan liked the fact that they were college kids into it, but they are the people, and the same people that go in that haven't read a comic book before Batman '89 and then want to go and read a comic book, read a graphic novel. Those terms are more for the straights that are coming in here and being like, I'm embarrassed because I've been reading all these novels, but I'm interested in seeing what Batman is like. Can you give me a graphic novel? Here's Killing Joke. Oh, yes, perfect. Tim Burton is like, I love those terms work for whereas that was like a one shot. It's not the actual size of it was like, basically what you would call a one shot. It would be, or DC like to call their thing. You can say that Julie did have that feeling, but in their sale of the book, they didn't just have the ad saying we're more than just superheroes and the new DC, all the stuff that was going on way before.
No, the ad was, DC Comics aren't just for kids. They aren't just for kids.
They had a bunch, but they had all the stuff to try, and then they also had the visual novel, meaning that you'd have this comic book and the story was just one issue, indifferent from because they were like, a lot of comic book people were like, what Stan, I think Gardner Fox said, what Stan did was great. Like, Stan is brilliant, but like he got away with not having to finish the story in one issue because you can continue and then have it go on. Whereas DC, even in the 80s, was like, hey, this is a visual novel. You got one piece of literature right in here, and I think what's the name? But in the actual thing, when in the 80s, Marvel, they didn't understand. They understand that they possibly had the better stories, but DC had the better characters. That's what we're saying. But they also understood that they called it Marvel Zombies. That at some point, these kids had just stopped buying DC, not because of that. Yeah. They didn't even know why they were doing it. They were fans of George Perez, and they were like, what happened to George Perez? And they're like, don't you see this? Got this hot book that's out from what's the name that they were blinded, they couldn't see. But I don't know that you can say that some people say, like they would say, people say that Marvel was cool and DC was not. And you have Julie's feelings on, but he was putting in his real, I think Neil Adams talked about, would try to put in his real world science into these books, and even in the Batman stuff, having some sort of thing to ground these things. So it's kind of the gray area. And I always look at the people that those terms, yes, sometimes they'd be someone who would be like, yeah, these are graphic novels where they've been trashed as a kid, bringing their comic books in. But, there's a difference where we grew up, because, you could get, your comic books could be stolen, and not stolen for resale, stolen for just to have. They used to steal comic books in the neighborhood, and not by some, nerdy guy, some hard rock come and steal them. But the thing is, that's why Will Eisner was like kind of trying to give some respect to the medium, because I feel this is more in terms of what Wortham was doing, is saying, hey, this is, and it's trying to say Wortham is right. There's some backwards. Yes, there are definitely people that can.
Wortham was right. Batman's a Peter ass and Superman's a fascist. Is that what he was saying?
But that's kind of where I'm saying, in saying that these are some backwards, and like the material in these books are bad, and he's saying the material in these books are still bad. Yes, in the thing with comic books, you have a monthly thing where they have to produce comic books on a monthly basis, and at the same time, you're not gonna, as if you have time to make a movie, obviously you're gonna have more time to make something that's gonna over 6 months, 2 years, it's going to be the quality of that, or a novel that you've been working on for who knows how long. I think Jack Kirby was saying it's like, hey, it's like I haven't seen what Picasso could do in a monthly period, right? In comparison to this, and it's like that's the thing that you're struggling with. Yes, there's going to be a lot more bad in comic books, and I'm not just going for the material. So that in going to that negativity, not to say that the words are exactly the same, but the tone is the same. Just saying that this is for for these dumb backwards kids, for the dumb kids, right? And that's what we need to wrestle it out of. And him being someone who profited from this, did the worst comic work for the worst stuff, where with the worst thing, which is Image, was basically saying, how I'm going to just make money. He did some decent stuff with it, some fun stuff with it from time to time, did some dark stuff with them too. But at the same time, it wasn't from the high-end stuff. His high-end stuff was going to be big numbers. What's that thing? From Hell. So I think, then it can't, the Lost Girls, I can't say that's high. That would be possibly the worst thing possible. That would be on the end of what Wortham's saying, taking female characters from from children's novels, and their sexcapades being stuck as those
sexcapades. It was porn. It was pornographic.
And that's other. He was also trying to sell a new form of porn that's not that's respectable. And it's like that's what I'm trying to get to. Just keep understand who's that in the sense of saying, in making this monthly sausage, it's going to be struggle, but you're going to be doing this terrible stuff, or you're going to be doing this questionable stuff. Then just let the medium be what it is. It's like I don't comment on hip hop being mumble rap. I think what I hear that I like, I enjoy. But just like the art form is always struggle for legitimacy, and I don't want it to turn into the adult type of comic book thing. You have that in Europe. You have that in stuff that's here. But at the same time, you just go in there and say that his words carry a lot of weight. And then, yes, you can, as you were saying, you can point out some backwards people. You can point out also, on the other side, you can point out people that bring their kids with them. So they read comic books. Maybe they want to be, respected. And I don't know if they use the term or not, but it's like they got kids, they moved on. The cosplayers, you went too far. You went too far. I'm not going at the cosplayers. I'm not going to go at them saying that because, and some may fall in that category, some may not. But it's just like that's something that I think they're getting it terrible too, because when someone tries to say something is the phony version of it, the news will say the cosplay version of something, and it's like they're taking this thing, which it's finding its way, is not something that it's not something that I necessarily understand. I understand as a kid make-believe and that sort of thing, but there's make-believe in a lot of art, out of things that are very profitable, not in the sense of cosplay, but, people still you see people doing commercials. It has a make-believe if you're in the writer's room, that sort of thing. But, they just get too, I know going along, but it's like, get too much negativity towards comic book. If you go to Wortham, to this, to now, and just say, you know what Will Eisner was saying. They're saying comic books will be dead and such. It's like, they always say they're going to be dead. He wouldn't say anything negative about it, and he'd just say, they're not movies, they're not TV, they're their own art form. And we go here, yes, you're going to have a lot of bad. But that's the thing I understood when I was reading reviews in the 80s. The popular stuff is going to get trashed by the comic reviewers. The stuff on the high end, the stuff that's not going to sell as much, is going to get all the praise. And that's what the same way works with movies. But saying that they're all trash, this own category, is just too much for me. I know we're a split decision. I know I went on long, but it's on you now.
Now again, he's calling rate. I guess you might take some issue with the whole thing calling it rubbish. And I'm just thinking that's just him being a Brit at the end of the day. They like to put rubbish at the end of everything. But the juvenescent nature of comics, no, it's there. It's still there at the end of the day. I've always taken these are fantasy characters. Okay. And then, if you look at the world of fantasy, not everything's Lord of the Rings. And then what was it? Game of Thrones. These guys wanted to come out and say this is fantasy. I was like, are you kidding me? With the amount of violence and such, that's the what is this? That's like the War of the Roses with three dragons in it. Other than that, like this, the aspect is a totally different thing. It's but the whole idea was he was saying, well, this is going to be fantasy for adults. So once it's adults, it has murder, rape, mutilation, all of these particular things. This makes it more adult at the end of the day. Very cynical, but I could see that's what Alan Moore would probably do with it. And the striking thing is the influence from super folks is so heavy. It's so heavy in that earliest stuff that we read, and probably might still be there at the end of the day. But super folks is not a cynical, dark read. It's not. I can't even say that it's 100% adult. At the end of the day, there's a lot of a lot of whimsy in that particular book. But that's not the stuff that he necessarily took from it. So, I mean, they're the guys who were like, what was this Legionnaire? I can't remember his name. He's like but he's like a fire Legionnaire, and his entire body has to be contained in a suit. And then
Wildfire?
The kid, Wildfire. And there's always the kid who's like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Wildfire just blew up? Something like that. That would be great to see. They always had the kids like that who wanted to see like the final thing for this character. And it's like, yeah, but then it's like Daffy Duck. I can only do it once. And the idea is this character still needs to be there. It's like the sandbox analogy where these toys still need to be there for other people to play with. Then you get somebody like Crusade who comes along. Now we got to break the toys. Okay. Or then you get somebody like Alan Moore. It's like, these are supposed to be kids' toys. He's like, let's put some adult pornographic toys in there and see what the kids think of it. Let's see how they play with them. That type of nonsense at the end of the day. But overall, these are still things meant for people young at heart. Nobody should be going into this, with that particular misconception, as long as they're running around in outfits. The biggest problem, however, is that you're talking about guys. I cannot remember the last time I saw somebody take their kids into a comic store when I was there. I've been in a comic store digging through books. I'm out there looking for, for buys. And I'm there for 2-3 hours going through the entire store, digging through all books, and not one kid comes in. Not one kid. Not like when we were buying it. Not, when we were kids. No kids. It's all geared towards guys in their, like, at the very least in their early 20s, overwhelmingly male, early 20s and on. But it's still the same stuff where, they want this stuff to be taken seriously. And I'm like, dude, it's fiction. It's fiction. It's okay to accept that these are things that you like to read this stuff. It's a fantasy aspect, sequential art, all of the things that make comic books, attractive to certain types of readers. But the cynical aspect, I don't apply with, and there, Moore is being really hypocritical, as I said earlier, because if he's calling these things out for being juvenile, then he's got to equally call himself out for being cynical in his approach and pornographic. After a certain point, just about everything that he's right has a healthy amount of porn in there. Did you read, what was this now? League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
Yeah.
After the Black Dossier. I can't remember if that was like 20. I can't remember the issue name of it, but that was like the last one I read. I had kept up with until the Black Dossier, and the Black Dossier was just kind of like, man, this is a head trip. I don't know what he was trying to accomplish with that, other than just to make that like a whole bunch of that was like a big Cliff Notes comic book, if you will. But then he got to the next one, and he killed off one of the characters I like, Alan Quartermain. But Alan Quartermain literally got killed by the villain reaching into his pants, pulling out his penis, and pissing on Alan Moore. Literally. So he's like, piss off. That's literally how, he didn't say it, but the figurative language and the execution is all there. And I was like, what is this? This is what he's being produced. But then he's got the audience who's saying, yeah, this is great. This is where the stuff is. These are the adult comics. This isn't the Superman stuff or the Batman stuff or the Green Arrow with the trick, with the trick punching bag glove. No, this is the real stuff. This is the adult stuff at the end of the day. So he's just as much, he's a hypocrite in terms of his production, okay? Because it's not adult, it's just pornographic and cynical. But then if I go back to comics, hey, look, this is supposed to be for people, okay, who still maintain a healthy amount of positivity and like these type of adventures. And it's, again, you could just say it's for all ages, even though they ushered all the kids out. But that's where they should be. Now, I also take it where he comes and says this, and he's influential when it comes into the community, but he's still talking to the same people who are abashed because, they read comic books and they feel that, if I read comic books, I'm going to get made fun of, this stuff isn't real, it's got to be taken seriously, because, otherwise, people going people think this way or that way about me opening up and reading a comic. Read what you want. You're an adult. You can read whatever you want. Everybody else is doing it. And if you enjoy this stuff, you enjoy this stuff. But it shouldn't be that hard to, say what it is. And he's not, again, he's spot on in terms of what it is.
I think I'm not saying what I get what you're saying. I mean, I can't agree with him ultimately because, the thing is, like I said,
Alan Moore.
no. I mean, the thing is, the hard part is.
I'm joking.
But, when you look at comic books, you have to even look at Stan Lee, because Stan Lee, ultimately, his approach was taken as a realistic approach to comic books. When it did have stuff they were doing was already kind of being done, you could see bits, not as much as what they were doing, but they were just like, all right, at some point you're going to need money, so they run out of money and that sort of thing. So now we're dealing with money issues from time to time, not regularly. We're not going to talk about that. We're not dealing with eating or anything like that. But at times we'll have them eating something just to have some fun with this sort of thing, which is not something that was strange. But there's a cycle that happens in comic books, and you have obviously the stuff they were originally created. You have the golden age and the silver age, which kind of took those elements, and they had the sci-fi, the Lois and the romance, the love triangle aspect, and Superman, Lois, and what's the name. But then they also have EC, which was a successful thing. And then we also have Mad, that was also successful, but they kind of stunted EC from what they were doing. And then you can see that kind of take on to what DC, outside of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, those EC things had led into Marvel, where they were kind of doing anthology stories and Charlton. So it's like you had this thing where they were kind of going, and then the 70s and 80s were kind of updating what Marvel was doing, both Marvel and DC. But when you get to 86 and you get to mainly, Watchmen, Dark Knight, I always go to the NAM, because I think that was like, worthy of something that was close to, like the war comics of what Joe Kubert were doing, but just in the 80s. So that was kind of, for at least the first 13 issues. So you had those kind of things out there. And then you had the 90s that was just taking what they were doing and just, pushing the art portion as far as you can go. And then because the art was pushed so far, then the writers had to push even further the other way to say, no, we need to take this back. And then you kind of get towards the end of the 90s where they're like, we need to try to build bridges again. Let's try to get this back. And even Alan Moore with his Tom Strong, like trying to get back where it was. And then it's like when the sales were just so low, it's just like, what's sold? Let's get Morrison to do kind of the Alan Moore on X-Men, and he kind of like saying, let's play with these cliches and let's push it as far as we can. We're going to do, we're going to kill a whole island of mutants. We're going to have a terrorist attack on Genosha. So it's like, it's kind of tough where even the people that supposedly know about nostalgia will kind of push those sort of elements. But I think it's a portion of how these comic books are doing, because you're going to up the ante on any of these things. So even with your child comic books. And I will point out, when I mentioned that people bringing their kids, I just want to say that they had kids. I didn't say the kids were reading comic books, because I've gone to Midtown, and many a time, and it's been, because I haven't gone there a lot, but recently, but I'm going there, and it's just kind of tough for me when someone brings their kids and they're going to pick up some comic books, and the kids are like, they got all this colorful stuff, and they're not even drawn to the more kiddie stuff that's on the side. They're just like waiting. Whereas, like, as a kid, my mother used to let us loose in the comic store. We'd be in there running around, buying as much stuff on Saturday. And at the same time, which was also lost, comic books took themselves out of the newsstand, which where the kids would get it mostly. And the magazines got this whole renaissance in the late '90s, and comic books had taken themselves out of there. So I know, I was buying most of the black magazines, but at the same time, there was also, I bought Neatest magazine. I was to buy Movie Line, that, and at the same time, comic books weren't in the newsstand anymore, which is like crazy, because that's where I would, browbeat my mom to get them. So I just say comic books have gotten, throughout the years, even though when they were in their inset, you could find people in the army reading the books, because there was something that was like, you're just there. It was what Europe used to have, what Europe has with comic books. It's what, in the past, before the 40s and Wortham, where they say dumb kids read comic books. So yes, there are some backwards people, and some people that, it's when they don't have anybody they can connect to this thing. But, we can't, in my feeling, let's stop taking this negative attitude towards the readers. And even if they're doing the cosplay, even if some of them have them and they have married, there's kids, that and the other, and regretfully the kids don't read comic books. It's like, Dad, you gotta go to a comic book store again? Oh, that's all you want to do. But they've gotten such a negative rap since the 40s. So I think this is in the not exact same words, but in the same thing of saying, hey guys, you dumb kids that are backwards in your basement, grow up. Now, to what you said, I can't say to people, hey, Spider-Man is a great character. He has some great villains. If he's super strong and he can battle with, a Herald of Galactus and this, that, and the other, that means he can't fight these the whole dynamic is broken, because you have Spider-Man holding back against Doc Ock, because it's like, hey, I could beat up. And Stan played with that too. He fought the Hulk, staggers the Hulk, then he fights Kraven. It's like, hey, I'm just going to hit you in the stomach. And then, that's just a little what I gave to the Hulk. He said, oof, that's the same thing that happened to the Hulk. So don't mess with, like, you're ruining your whole dynamic of making this guy super powerful, or talking about him holding back because you have this character. But, ultimately, people want their Davids these days to be able to kill and maim Goliath and cut his head off toe to toe. What do you say to that?
Those are the people who we knew those kids. Okay, we knew those kids.
You're not right. You're not right for that. I don't like you doing that.
We knew those kids when we were growing up. Those weren't the guys who loved the comics. They just loved their own character, and they wanted their character to win no matter what. And that was it. And then it's gotten to the point now where they facilitate a lot of that. Where I think I read some Batman issue where Catwoman bat kicked the Flash. The Flash is under mind control by Poison Ivy, but somehow she can still, get off of, a kick or something. And then I was like, well, it's in his book, so this type of stuff can happen. I'm like, okay. But then when you get the criticisms, take those criticisms. When they're saying, oh, look at this is kid stuff and this is juveniles, take the criticisms, because that is a very juvenile position to have. Oh, I want my character to win no matter what. Now, and every time, look, anybody listening to the show understands, or should know that my favorite character is Superman. Every time I try to raise the level in terms of the approach to Superman, I can't go anywhere with it. Anytime I was like, no, look at this character. He's archetypical. Look at this character. Look at the world that they created for you. It's like, no, I get so much pushback about this character and where he needs to be. And I try to accept it as well. He's a mythological character. So people like aspects of him and so on and so forth. But no, if you try to raise it, not even much, You just try to raise it to the point like, hey, these are some things that I've connected with the character, and I'm seeing how this stuff, happens. No, I can't go anywhere with it. So when he's talking about Juvenile, I'm like, look, I see that on a regular basis where guys like, no, I like this character this way, okay, this way, and any changes to it, I don't want it. That again is a very juvenile position when it comes to approaching these particular things. However, at the end of the day, it's still entertainment. And if that's what you want from your entertainment, that's fine. And they provide a good amount of it at the end of the day. So, you can't have it both ways where, hey, I don't want to be maligned, but I'm going to act this way in my approach towards the material. So, and I've seen this for years. And it's not that I want to, not every comic is going to be this incredibly high level thing. A lot of the stuff, to be quite honest, is just going to be, day-to-day adventures, and you tune in for this, but everybody's still reading, hoping that, who knows, this might be the issue that kicks off like a really, really great adventure, and I was able to experience it in real time as opposed to having to go back, 5 years to read this particular story. So, I totally get that aspect of it. But in the same breath, and I sell comics, I get the guys who don't want to read anything, that's new. They only want to read these particular adventures. Oh, I love Superboy, but only the Silver Age Superboy. Okay, again, you're talking about something that puts you in a particular frame, that puts you in a particular period. Okay, what can I tell you? If the cap fits, wear it. But anytime I've tried to broaden the discussion, push it with any of the nope, nobody wants. The face glazes over. So I'm like, okay, fine. This is where you guys are at, no problem. But when somebody calls you out, you can't be angry about it. Own up to it, enjoy the stuff, call it what it is. But it doesn't mean the comic books are bad, and it doesn't mean the comic books aren't a legitimate form of literature and entertainment.
The thing is, he's just, I mean, in not the same words, but just taking the whole industry and being like, y'all this, and y'all are not gonna grow up and going to watch these Marvel movies. Like this, his past statements. Going to watch these Marvel movies. This is how you get to fascism. This is like,
well, hey, you remember what you were saying about Stan Lee? How Stan Lee was like the leader, Merry Marvel Marching Society, and Stan was the guy telling you reading these things are cool. Look how adult you are. Look, how much better, and so on and so forth. Alan Moore is the opposite. Alan Moore is the anti-Stan.
well,
He's the guy coming out over here telling you you're an idiot for reading this stuff. You look at you fool. You haven't grown up yet. Read my comic books. They're filled with pornography.
The hard part. That's the thing. The hard part, and this is the main struggle that Stan and Steve Ditko had, because Stan would go to talk to the college kids, and it's like the hard rocks to see me reading comic books that used to read comic books. And, like, this is what I think Mark Jackson, the basketball player, he said when he ran into DMX, and DMX saw Mark Jackson's son, and he went to him, pulled him aside, and said, "You getting any yet?" He's like, he was 14. He was like, but his father heard it, and he's like, I don't want to know. I don't think he was getting anything at that point. He was like, I don't want my father to know I know what he knows of me. He's like, no, that sort of thing where it's like, I was reading a comic book, and he was like, me and my brother there, and he's just like, yo, well, he was a little more direct, but he's like, is Batman getting any? Yeah. Superman getting any? I think so. What about this character? Is Wolverine getting any? Like, that's basically his interest. And that's the same thing, not the same way, but the same way the college kids were like, oh, these comics are good, but Stan, we got a question. Why does Spider-Man, when his spider sense happens, he has these lines around his head and his half of the Spider-Man mask on there? Like, can't they tell that he's Spider-Man because they could see his spider sense? And he's like, Steve, we got to explain why these things are around him. And then, and at the same time, like, a lot of the stuff that his pushback was, hey, these spider poses, please stop doing the spider. Even though he was like, first of all, it's brilliant. This looks great. And he's like, oh, you can't do that. Then it's like, oh, no. This is I think it's the final, not the final chapter, but in a long storyline where Spider-Man keeps getting defamed. Like everything keeps going wrong for him, and he ultimately gives up. And who's that guy? But it's like a lot of things that he was taking that he had issue with. He was taking from these people that had, only like barely looking over their shoulders at comic books, where they saw something they liked or they liked some of the art, and then they're looking like and saying, "Well, we don't understand this thing." Where they're being ridiculous. I don't like to like try to get to those people that are like cynical in their stage, the straights that like hearing the term graphic novels, the straights that like to hear that comic books grew up. Yes, everything is over time. As you go from one stage of the medium, they start to build up and add things to it. More so the superheroes, since they, had gone from Superman being Superman, and then you imply in the 60s or whatever, even before the 60s, in the Silver Age, hey, here he has a kid and whatnot, or here's him getting married to someone on Krypton or something like that. They have the adult stuff in there, not done in an adult way, but it's like, and then doing those things, those are the things of them doing it again. But there's so many people that buy into that, not comic fans, but the straights, or people like to call the normies, that are like saying, okay, I'll pick up the Watchmen, and Watchmen is still a bestseller, because all the backwards comic fans, because all the adults that are like saying, I don't want to be seen reading a comic book, but I can pick up this Watchmen, yeah, that sort of thing. Whereas you have, or the Stanley Kubrick movie, where you have movies and the stuff they're doing in the 70s, where movies weren't, that dark, but and they had rough movies, but at the same time they had needed to get the people to come to, because they had TV. They were like, why are we going to the movies? Like the TV's entertaining, and it's like they enjoyed it. So the studio films died, and then these young filmmakers came up, and they were looking at more of the European stuff, and then the movies got all gritty and extra violent and closer to reality, that sort of thing. And even if you look at Superman the movie, I have to say that it was realistic, but at the same time, it fit in that thing, in the style and the actors and that sort of thing. So they didn't actually make Superman, they did make him believable, not all verisimilitude, but they put it in the setting that was New York. They have it in the building. I think it's on 34th Street that has the globe in the building, or maybe it's on 42nd or something like that. The globe is in, I guess, 42nd. The globe is within when you walk into the building, and they had that as the, what's the name? It kind of grounded it into reality. So anyone who's iffy on that stuff, and even Americana. So it's like, that's the cycle that you kind of go through. But at the same time, more can't deal with you and your freaking comments, man. Like, yo, just leave. I was saying, I had a great time. I made a lot of money. I had some struggles, but it was ultimately fun. If you guys are still buying League of the Extraordinary Gentlemen, rock on. Based on, like, instead of doing the Get a Life thing, go out there and just see, like, hey, this is, what, Will Eisner, you're an old pro, like saying, hey, this something I did, and I had fun doing it when I was a younger man. So, but I didn't expect this to be split, but I think it turned into a good conversation. Anything else you want to lead to? Want to say?
No, I mean, look, I think he hit everything. Alan Moore is doing his Alan Moore thing. He's no different than he's been for the last 20 years.
Oh, well, that's the last thing to say. This thing was the graphic novel. The collections are the trades, but in a sense, it's still the comic book, right? Or the comics, or whatever. All of that, as we started to say. So, if you're embarrassed, just the thing, and remember, the thing of it is that it's always going to be, the superhero stuff is always going to be a kids medium sort of thing. It's still going to be something that has been able to fit into having some more, at least not total or realism, like not reality. Like Neil Adams, when he was drawing, it wasn't doing realistic, it's just adding some realism to it, that sort of thing. So that's a difference in what you're kind of doing. But it's, we've had stuff like, the X-Men and whatnot. So we're closing out Spinner Rack.
We're out.
Out.